Is that what you're asking? What the difference is between a marriage plan and a prenup?
Yeah.
So you're saying like a marriage plan, you could keep separate assets separate without doing a prenuptial agreement, whereas a prenuptial agreement would like you're consenting to come out of the default community property.
Yeah. We're focused on the success. It protects both parties. It includes a prenup. So a prenup is part of the marriage plan, but we go a little bit deeper. That we also do an estate plan, which protects if the relationship ends by death. So your relationship's going to end someday, guys. I hate to break it to you. We're all going to die, right? That's mortality rate, 100%. We all know that, right? Mm-hmm. So in our business, we're usually dealing with this, right? Death, when relationships end upon death, and how to divide assets at that time. It's a lot of the same issues of how to divide assets if the relationship ends in divorce. When we do a marriage plan, I like to back up and say that we're focused on the success of the relationship. The reason to do this, why do you do a prenup, a marital agreement? Some people, there's a stigma to them still. I'd say it's getting better, or there's less of a stigma now, but it still can put a strain on the relationship. There's value to it by clarifying, putting in writing what the expectations are of each party. So that's what I like to focus on. Focus on, providing a plan that will allow the marriage to thrive and succeed, and where you've already discussed these financial issues, where you're in agreement of how they're going to be handled. You negotiate that stuff while you're still in love versus after the relationship's ended. Attorneys get involved. If it's not clear, we can argue things whatever way that we're hired to. A lot of times, if it's unclear and you're just getting one side of the story from your client, that's what it looks like. What do we want going into this? If you're bringing assets into the relationship, what's the expectation of that? Now, what makes us good or equipped to do these marriage plans is we help a lot of blended families, don't we, Will?
Yeah.
What we call his and hers kids, his, hers, and ours. What's that?
I said that's a good way of putting it, his, hers, and ours.
Sometimes there's joint kids together, but that changes the dynamic.
Right, and it changes how we do our estate plan because we may be trying to control and protect for prior children. Yeah.
Have you had some uncomfortable meeting with clients talking about those issues?
Yeah, I've had my fair share, and some of them, it's not awkward at all, but just needed to be discussed. Sometimes clients have discussed it and they're very open and they know exactly what to do, but sometimes they come to the meetings and they haven't thought about it, and it does get a bit awkward, and you need to kind of explain the difference between different trusts and different ways to control for children from prior relationships. But sometimes, the current marriage doesn't like that so much because then they don't get to keep control of those assets upon the death.
Yeah, that's right. You're balancing those different interests.
Yeah.
And man, not to stereotype, but mama bears, they can really protect their little cubs sometimes, I would say. And it can go both ways too, where sometimes they might have unrealistic expectations of what's going to happen to their assets. It's not easy. I've had people where they just give up, I would say. They're not willing to either compromise or come to a realistic expectation, so they just don't do it at all. So when we're dealing with that at the estate planning issue, or at the estate planning time, if they've already been living together and acquired assets together, or things like that, it's more difficult, I would say.
Yeah.
Because they might have some expectations of what they want to have happen. Going into a relationship is a great time, because we can figure out how to protect both of them, both parties. Let's talk some what it means to protect the parties going into a relationship. So here's things I've seen where, what if one party is giving up their working years? Instead of working, the other partner wants them to vacation with them. And, that I've seen what we call lopsided estates, where, one partner has acquired assets and says, what, I want to enjoy my life, vacation, and I want you to come with me and enjoy that. But the other party was like, okay, that's great. That sounds amazing. But what happens 5, 10, 20 years down the road? If this ends, and I don't have any money set aside because I spent all that time touring with you. So what we did in that situation, in the premarital agreement, we determined what the spousal support would be based upon the length of the marriage. Negotiate it while they're still in love. Don't let lawyers get in there and interpret it later, how much it should be. Just come to a clear amount. So that way, if it does happen, they're each protected. Can you think of other interests that parties need to be protected from?
How property is passed on, based on, do you want it to pass in the way that the normal Arizona law does? If both of you all are owning a property together and one person dies, how do you want that to pass along? Is going to be something that you really need to think about.
Yeah. So like houses, a lot of times people will come to us when they've already purchased a house together, or maybe one party has used their funds to purchase it, and they say, "What should we do?" And this is a lot of we're seeing multi-generation houses, so parents living with their kids where they each have purchased it, or siblings. People that they don't want to live alone, and they don't want to be renters. They team up with a family member and purchase a property. They don't get married, but it's a lot of the same issues. So for those people, we'll do what's called a cohabitation agreement, which is very similar to premarital agreement, but is setting expectations and deciding what's going to happen there.